Austria, 1885. A quarry worker in Wolfsegg splits a block of brown coal and finds something inside the fracture, a small iron cube. Clean edges, a precise groove running around its middle like a manufactured seam. The coal is tertiary formation, 60 million years old. He does not know what to make of it. The object travels to European museums. Scientists examine it. It becomes known as the Salzburg Cube, and eventually, the Wolfsegg Iron. It joins a category that would haunt alternative history for over a century. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found where human technology should not exist. How does a machined metal cube end up sealed inside rock, 60 million years old? That is what this investigation was built to answer. Subscribe now. What comes next will rewrite what you thought you knew. Don't let the algorithm bury it. The term out-of-place artifact, OOPArt, in the shorthand used by researchers on both sides of the debate, refers to any physical object found in a geological or archaeological context that appears to contradict the established timeline of human history. These objects have been physically examined, photographed, and in some cases, held in museum collections for more than a century. The debate around them is not fringe. It is active, ongoing, and consequential, because the standard of evidence required to evaluate them matters enormously. This investigation examines 5 of the most cited cases: the London Hammer, the Koso artifact, the Dorchester pot, the Kaluga bolt, and the Wolfsegg Iron itself. 5 objects, 5 different countries, 5 separate explanations, and 1 structural pattern, connecting all of them that alternative history accounts consistently overlook. By the end of this journey, you will know exactly what each object is, how it ended up where it was found, and perhaps more importantly, why the misidentification keeps happening with such remarkable consistency, generation after generation. Across cultures and centuries, the London Hammer arrives first. Its explanation is already waiting. The rock encasing the London Hammer is not 400 million years old. It formed within decades. That is not an opinion. That is what limestone concretion chemistry demonstrates. In June of 1936, a couple named Max and Emma Hahn were hiking near Red Creek, Texas, when they found a piece of nodular rock with a wooden handle protruding from one end. They brought it home. It sat in their possession for years, quietly drawing attention from neighbors and local curiosity seekers. When their son eventually had the rock cut open, what emerged was an iron hammerhead, competently made, with a head construction and handle design entirely consistent with 19th century American manufacture. The rock encasing it was calcium carbonate common limestone that had grown around the abandoned tool after years of mineral exposure near a creek-fed spring. Stop and translate that into physical reality. Limestone concretions form continuously. Mineral-laden groundwater deposits calcium carbonate around any solid object it encounters: a shell, a bone, a dropped nail, an old tool, and hardens around it over years, 2 decades, not millions of years. Decades. The process is well documented in natural spring systems across the American Southwest. The rock surrounding the hammer was not ancient. It was young limestone that had accumulated around a modern tool left near a creek. The alternative history claimed that the hammer was embedded in Ordovish rock, dating to 400 million years ago, rests entirely on a misreading of the site geology. The Huns found the nodule near a creek surface, not excavated from a documented stratigraphic layer. No geologist was present at the discovery. No stratigraphy was recorded. The 400 million year figure was drawn from the general regional geology of Central Texas and applied without any documentation to an object whose precise find location was never professionally established. The iron chemistry confirmed the modern origin. Laboratory analysis found sulfur, chlorine, and metallurgical characteristics consistent with 19th century American smelting signatures of industrial era production that do not appear in naturally deposited. Iron and the wooden handle had not fully petrified. That is a clear marker of recent, not ancient, origin. The picture resolves into something straightforward. A working hammer from the 1800s, lost or abandoned near a calcium carbonate spring encased in mineral deposits over decades, found by a family with no geological training, and subsequently claimed, without professional documentation, to be sealed inside rock from the Ordovician period. The irony is that the limestone did exactly what limestone does. No ancient civilization required. But the London Hammer's explanation depends on a readable chemistry and a traceable manufacturing style. What about objects that offer neither objects that appear to be precision-engineered components with ceramic insulation, threaded metal cores, and internal contacts that no geological process would accidentally produce? That question leads to the Mojave Desert, and to a discovery that confused its finders for nearly 8 years before anyone thought to look up OOPArt's catalog. In 1961, 3 rock hunters in the Coso Mountains of California cracked open what they believed was a geode and found a precision-engineered ceramic cylinder with a metal core at its center. It was heavy, it was symmetrical, it was clearly not a rock. They 3 men, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike McKeesel, were amateur gem hunters who sold mineral specimens. When McKeesel's saw blade was ruined trying to cut through the object, they knew they had found something unusual. Maxey, who had some background in geology, estimated that the outer shell of calcium carbonate suggested an age of roughly 500,000 years. That figure spread within years. The object had become one of the most cited OOPArt cases in alternative history. Physical evidence, writers claimed, of an advanced pre-human civilization or extraterrestrial contact. Consider what it actually was. In 1969, a geologist and 2 electrical engineers, acting independently of one another, examined photographs and reached the same conclusion. The Coso artifact was a spark plug, specifically a Champion spark plug manufactured in the early 1920s. The ceramic insulator matched Champion's documented porcelain specifications exactly. The hexagonal steel casing matched the thread pitch of Champion plugs from that production era. The internal electrode configuration was consistent with early automobile ignition technology. The calcium carbonate shell was not evidence of ancient age. It was concretion, the same mineral deposition process that encased the London Hammer, operating over decades around a discarded automobile part in a desert environment where mineral-rich water was present. The irony here is precise. The very process that convinced people these objects were ancient is a process so fast, so ordinary, and so well understood that geologists use it as a teaching example. The Dorchester pot tells a different version of the same story. In 1852, workers blasting rock near Dorchester found a metal vessel among the debris, a zinc and silver container with inlaid floral patterns, clearly crafted with skill. The rock it allegedly came from was Precambrian, potentially over 600 million years old. Alternative history accounts cited it as evidence of pre-Ediacaran metallurgy technology from an era before complex multicellular life had arrived on this planet. What the account never established was provenance. No geologist supervised the blast. No one documented where in the debris the vessel was found relative to the undisturbed rock face. It appeared, as many OOPArt cases do, in the testimony of a single observer, published in a local newspaper, with no independent verification of its position in the geological formation. The most straightforward explanation is surface contamination, a decorative vessel present near the blast site, mixed into ejected debris by the force of the explosion, recovered without any means of distinguishing it from material genuinely embedded in the rock. What do you notice? At this stage of the investigation is a pattern forming. The London Hammer had no documented The Coso artifact went unexamined for 8 years. The Dorchester pot had no witness to its position in the rock. These are not minor gaps in the record. They are the record. And the pattern sharpens considerably with the next object, found in Russian coal, photographed widely, one that would convince any machinist at a glance that it was threaded steel. The operating word is patience. Nature has had considerably more of it than we have. Of all 5 objects in this investigation, the Kaluga bolt is the one that most convincingly looks like it came off an assembly line, and it is the one with the most complete, most verifiable, and most humbling natural explanation. The object was found in Russia, near the city of Kaluga, embedded in a stratum of coal dated to approximately 300 million years ago. In photographs, and they circulated widely, it looks exactly like a threaded metal bolt. A metal shaft, visible threading along its length. Ebonly spaced, precisely angled. The kind of component you could purchase at any hardware store. Sealed inside Carboniferous rock that formed before the first dinosaur walked the earth. Alternative history accounts described it as proof of an advanced civilization in the Carboniferous period. Some pushed further, suggesting extraterrestrial origin. The threading, they argued, was too regular, too geometrically precise to be a natural formation. What researchers found when they examined the object was a crinoid. Stop. Let that settle. A crinoid, also called a sea lily, is a marine invertebrate that has existed on this planet for roughly 480 million years. It is not a plant, despite its name. It is an animal. It anchors itself to the seafloor on a long, segmented stem. And the segments of that stem, called columnoles, are circular discs stacked in a precise, interlocking series. When fossilized and viewed along the length of the stem, the columnar structure produces the appearance of threading, not similar to threading, functionally indistinguishable from it to an untrained eye. The surface of the Kaluga bolt is mineralized organic material. Crinoid columnals replaced by iron compounds during fossilization over hundreds of millions of years. The threading is the natural segmented architecture of the stem, preserved with the precision that only geological time and the right mineral conditions can produce. Consider what that means. Evolution, working without intention or design, produced a structural form that human engineering independently arrived at the helix, the thread, the interlocking spiral, because that shape is mechanically efficient. Nature found it first, by approximately 480 million years. We did not invent the threaded fastener. We rediscovered it. That is not a diminishment of human achievement. It is something more unsettling. It means the universe has been running the same structural equations long before anyone was present to record them. The crinoid did not build the bolt. The crinoid is the bolt, and the distinction matters more than it might seem. The Kaluga bolt is not evidence of ancient technology. It is evidence of convergent form. The same geometry arrived at independently by evolution and by engineering. Separated by epochs we struggled to imagine, and yet, even knowing this, the photograph remains convincing. That dissonance is important. It tells you something precise about the limits of visual pattern recognition as an investigative tool. The eye finds what it expects. The mind supplies the context. The gap between those two processes is where every case in this investigation lives, and where each one, eventually, unravels. But the most unsettling part of this story is still ahead, because the object that opened this investigation, the iron cube from the Austrian coal mine, has not one but two possible explanations. Neither requires a lost civilization. One of them requires a journey of millions of miles through space. The iron cube from the Austrian coal mine. The object that opened this investigation turns out to have the simplest explanation of all 5 cases. Return to Wolfsegg, 1885. The coal surrounding the cube is tertiary formation, roughly 60 million years old. The cube itself is iron, approximately 2¼ inches on each side, weighing just over 785 grams. Under magnification, it shows no evidence of the edges that appeared sharp in early photographs, taken under certain lighting conditions by people with no mineralogical training, are irregular at close inspection. Not the crisp right angles of a manufactured component. Mineralogical analysis pointed toward one of 2 origins. The first is foundry waste. Cast iron fragments were produced in enormous quantities by the metalworks of 19th century Central Europe. Small nodules and miscast pieces were discarded routinely near mines and quarries. A fragment of foundry iron deposited near the Wolfsegg site through a crack or a pre-existing excavation could have been incorporated into the coal seam without requiring any geological paradox. The second explanation is more remarkable, though not more mysterious. Think about that for a moment. The Wolfsegg iron may be a meteoritic iron nodule. Iron meteorites contain a distinctive internal structure known as the Widmanstätten, patina crystalline lattice that forms over millions of years as metal cools slowly in the vacuum of space. When an iron meteorite fractures, the cleavage planes defined by that crystalline structure produce a groove-alike boundary running around the exterior of the fragment, precisely what the Wolfsegg iron displays. The groove that inspired a century of alternative history may be the boundary between two crystal systems in an object that formed in the early solar system, cooled in the void between planets over geological eons, and arrived on Earth via meteorite impact predating the tertiary coal itself. Not evidence of ancient human industry, evidence of something older, far older, and entirely natural. The most astonishing explanation for the Wolfsegg iron requires no lost civilization. It requires only that we take seriously what the universe produces on its own, without any human involvement whatsoever. An object forged in the death of a star, traveling through space for billions of years, landing on an Austrian hillside, and waiting 60 million years to be mistaken for a machine. At this point in the investigation, the individual explanations have been delivered. What remains is the structural question. The one all 5 cases share, and the one that explains why the misidentification keeps happening with such consistency. All 5 objects share 3 documentary failures. First, no professional excavation context. In none of these cases was a trained geologist or archaeologist present at the moment of discovery to document the precise stratigraphic layer, the surrounding matrix, or the relationship between the object and the undisturbed rock. Discovery conditions were informal. In several cases, the account was secondhand. Stratigraphic documentation is the single most critical piece of information for evaluating any claimed geological anomaly, and it is absent in every case here. The operating word is provenance. Second, no independent chain of custody. These objects traveled from informal discovery to private possession to public claim without independent verification of their fine context. By the time researchers could examine them, the original geological relationship had been severed and could not be reconstructed. Third, and this is the decisive argument, no associated evidence. A global technological civilization does not leave isolated objects. It leaves infrastructure. It leaves waste. It leaves tool marks on the landscape, chemical traces in the sediment, metallurgical residues in soil, and the material byproducts of production at scale. A civilization capable of manufacturing iron cubes and threaded fasteners and spark plug components would produce those objects in the millions. The geological record would contain not one anomalous bolt, but thousands, scattered across every continent, in every datable stratum where that civilization operated. None of that exists. What exists is isolated objects, separated by continents and centuries, each found by untrained observers, each lacking documentation, each explainable through a natural mechanism requiring no revision of the established geological record. The pattern is not in the objects. The pattern is in the documentation failure, and that failure is consistent, and almost inevitable because genuine geological anomalies are found by people who are not geologists, in circumstances that cannot be controlled, under conditions that cannot be reconstructed after the fact. Remove the documentation and the independent verification and the chain of custody, and any object in any context can be made to seem miraculous. That is not a criticism of the people who found them. It is a precise description of the limits of human perception without a structured framework to constrain it. The scientific method was designed specifically to close that gap. When it is not applied, the gap remains open. There is a unified idea in what these 5 objects reveal. And it is not about ancient civilizations. Each case began with a genuine moment of disorientation. A worker holding something that looked wrong. A collector whose saw blade failed on what should have been a rock. A quarryman lifting a cube from coal sealed for 60 million years. Those moments were real. The confusion was honest. What for you with the alternative history, the lost civilization narrative, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, was not dishonesty. It was the human mind doing what it was built to do. Detect pattern, assign agency, and construct a story that makes the strange thing meaningful. What the evidence tells us, in every case, is that the strange thing was meaningful, just not in the way the story required. Imagine a geologist turning a fossilized crinoid under a lamp, seeing the threading, understanding the convergence, setting it down with the particular quietness of someone who has just been reminded that nature is older, stranger, and more patient than any history we have managed to write. The mystery was never in the rock. It was in us. Every mystery we uncovered today leads somewhere deeper. Subscribe. The next investigation is already in progress.